What if I told you the Super Bowl 60 winner was predicted nearly 3,000 years ago? And maybe predicted isn't the right word, but cosmically aligned with forces that have shaped empires, toppled dynasties, and predicted and marked every American revolution. This is Mandalandia, and today we're going to take a deep dive into my brain, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff that no other sports analysis is checking for in the slightest. We're going to go over different things, including Chinese astrology, some Chinese mythology with the dragon and snake, some revolutionary planetary transits, and yeah, we're going to reveal why February 8th, 2026 is about way more than just the Seahawks and Patriots game. This is about which version of America survives the next decade. Okay, so we're going to get into the basics of how I've been able to predict the last 6 Super Bowl winners. So the first thing is I use Chinese astrology to do so. There's some basic stuff that I use. So first off is going to be triads. Triads are like groups of people who get together. Those are your friends. So a triad would be rooster, ox, snake. We're in year of the snake. So rooster and ox are their acquaintances, closer acquaintances, their friends, I would say. We also have the pig, goat, and rabbit as another triad, and those would actually be the enemy signs of the first one. Each one correlates with a different enemy sign. The second thing I look at is the actual enemy signs. So snake and pig, those are enemy signs. I take that a step further and use that entire group and say like, hey, if my friend doesn't get along with you, I, in theory, also don't get along with you. Slightly childish, slightly very high school, but it works. So yeah, and then lastly, we use secret friends. So secret friends are out of triad alliances that you have based off of your animal with a different animal. So for example, the snake is secret friends with the monkey. That means when there's monkey energy present, it's going to do extra well for seemingly no reason. There's also some extra sauce that we're going to learn today with the dragon and snake and understand why they have a connection that's not necessarily written in the way that we would expect, but more so in between the lines. So I have my own system that I use called Meta Money Lines, and it's my way of just really testing. I love to see what's going to happen. I test lots of games, not just like major games, but you know, I do everything from WWE, not WWE, MMA to MLB, different games, and NBA, NHL, all of that stuff. NFL has been my favorite, especially once we get to the Super Bowl, because you know, it is the biggest game, the biggest stage. So I have my own system, and I have a mathematical equation that I've created that I run everything through to get my prediction. So my prediction for this game is that the Seahawks are going to win. I have a 10 versus 9 likelihood that they are going to win. So to take it a step further, I always backtest, and for the last 3 games they played, dating back to 2016, it's predicted that the Seahawks were going to win each one of those games, and they did. So I would say it's pretty likely that it's actually going to happen once again, but of course there's always room for error. This game is really about something much more than what meets the eye. And if we think about it, the Super Bowl used to be a form of entertainment. When we look at like gladiator sports, that wasn't just a game, it was entertainment. This is entertainment. This is in between the lines what they're trying to tell us is going on without us really understanding what is going on. So it's the stuff in between the lines that we really have to read, and that's why this game in particular is so interesting to me. And if there's any game that I feel like it could really go either way, it's this one. Just because the spiritual implications, the stuff going on, the planetary transits, there is just so much where it really could take a turn in ways that we didn't really see it. From my own system standpoint, I would say that I'm 98% confident Seahawks are going to win, but even at that, it is going to be a close game because we have a 1-point spread essentially. So I've seen in my system when there are higher spreads, that's when it's like clear winners. Because this is so close, I'm not going to say it has me wishy-washy, but it definitely has me at a place where I'm like, okay. And then like I said, all the other additional factors definitely of interest for me. Another super important thing to know is that this game is falling on February 8th, 2026, which is actually still in Year of the Snake. So 2026 is Year of the Horse, However, Chinese New Year is not until the 17th. So, therefore, you use the year following up until that date. My birthday is in early January, so this is always a problem I've kind of had. Most of my life I thought it was a tiger actually, but I'm actually an ox. So yeah, that's one of the like nuances, especially when we're looking at the Super Bowl. So with it being year of the snake, it's also year of the wood snake. Once again, important when we start looking at the different layers that build this crazy salad. So to break down some of the information a little bit further, I'm going to give you a little extra sauce. So the Patriots were originally founded in November 1959, which is year of the pig. They had their first season in the year of the rat. I use those two energies. There's a couple rules to my system, but I use a few different energies to make up their entire energetic being. It's the same way as like maybe when you get married, your last name changes, but that doesn't mean you're still not who you were before your last name changed. You're not entirely a new person. So it's kind of that same gist. So for the Patriots specifically, they were founded in November 1959, which makes them a pig. Their first season was in 1960, which is year of the rat, and then they were renamed from the Boston Patriots to the New England Patriots in 1971, which is pig energy once again. The two energy bodies I would look at for them is pig and rat, and it's very interesting. I might add a little bit more to that in a second, but I think those are definitely two energies that are kind of like not as well equipped as they should be for tomorrow's game. Seahawks were founded in 1974, which is a tiger year, but they didn't play their first season till 2 years later in 1976, which is year of the dragon. So the two energies I look at for them is the dragon and the tiger. So when we talk about it being year of the snake, there is some crazy implications. We're gonna start with the Seahawks. So the Seahawks have tiger and dragon energy. Tiger is neutral with the snake, right? But the dragon and the snake have a secret connection. In Chinese mythology, there is a connection between the dragon and the snake. Chinese mythology essentially says that snakes are baby dragons. In their mythology, they believe that they start off as water snakes, and then over thousands and thousands of years, they evolve into winged dragons. So the thing with that, you kind of have to think about it as like a Pokemon evolution, you know. As you grow and power up, then you get access to new powers. I never played Pokemon. Hopefully I got that analogy right. They are essentially the same creatures, just at different stages in life. So when we look at that energy for the Seahawks especially, there is a element of like parent meets child, you know. The snake is essentially a baby dragon, so the two are very interconnected. You can see the origin versus like the evolution, and there's this cosmic synergy going on between the two that we don't see in any other connection between the Chinese zodiac except for secret friends. When we look at those two, they're definitely interconnected in ways that we don't typically understand because it typically doesn't happen. This is where I like to add that like mythology. A couple years ago when the Rams won over the Bengals, I also did this as well because it was a water year as the element, because there's two pieces to the Chinese zodiac. So you have your elements and then you also have your animal. And I'll put like a quick infographic about how that is categorized. But yeah, so it's a two-part system. So what I noticed in the story of the Great Race is the reason why the tiger didn't win, even though they were maybe the best equipped to win, aside from the dragon, is that water was their kryptonite essentially. They were not able to swim fast enough in the water, so then they ended up placing third, I think it is, instead of first as they should have. So when it was a water year and we had a tiger element showing up in the Super Bowl, I realized, hey, you know what? It's a water year. That energy is going to influence and create a sort of kryptonite that there previously wouldn't have been in other years. In Chinese creation myths, we have two gods who are named Fuxi and Nuwa. Pardon my pronunciation, hopefully I got that right, who are depicted as having human heads, one with a snake body and one with a dragon body. They're intertwined with one another, and it's said that together they were able to create humanity. We could also see that tying into the DNA double helix it's crazy when we think that ancient Chinese artists drew this nearly 2,000 years ago, and this is part of their mythos. So yeah, definitely crazy, but I feel like it adds more to the mythology, to the lore, and why we definitely should consider those two. Some of the stuff we would also say about the dragon is that they are very big power, they are visionaries, they are the big idea. Some of the mythos in the Great Race is that the dragon actually stopped to help different communities along his way, and that's why he wasn't first. It was always about something more. And I think even when we look into modern day culture, it's not maybe the biggest thing now that it was previously, but everybody wanted a dragon baby because it was said that those are like the emperors of society. Those are the noble ones. But then when we also think about that too, this is something I had seen like a documentary on, that they were talking about, is like the issue with everyone wanting a dragon baby is essentially, think about all those people, those babies who are one day going to grow up and be compared to one another, versus being in a less satisfactory year. You know, they might not have as tough competition because there's not so many babies being tried to be born in that one year. So, you know, good and bad. Snakes are about being very strategic, being very patient, grounding, because they're so close to the ground, obviously. They really have to strike well, but they can't just do that at a major capacity because they are close to the ground. They have to really, really draw that power in and then evolve from there and bring that into reality. When we look at 2026, this Super Bowl being in Year of the Snake, we definitely have to say that the Seahawks have a foot up, especially as a team having dragon energy. They have a connection to snakes and the Year of the Snake that you cannot be unless you're a snake or a dragon yourself. So definitely very interesting with that. And another aspect with that is when they meet, they definitely complete each other. They are that evolution once again. You know, it's the origin and the final form coming together, and when you get that, it's kind of like the full effect. You see it all through the thousands of years of evolution that it took. And as for the Patriots are Year of the Pig. The pig is a natural enemy of the snake. They don't get along. They're 6 apart. It's that clashing energy that is going on between the two. And then when we take it one step further, this is kind of where we think big brain a little bit, but next year is Year of the Horse. You know who the horse's enemy sign is? The rat. So even if this fell a few weeks later, or Chinese New Year was moved up, there would still be some energy where it didn't flow necessarily the way that it should, as beneficial for the Patriots as it could be. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah, either way, it would be like water and oil trying to mix, and you know, that's not gonna happen. So yeah. Let's get into the elements. Okay, here's a quick crash course on the Chinese elemental system. There are 5 different elements. They have metal, which we traditionally in the Western world don't use. They have this system where they either help or fight one another, and I'm just gonna talk through that system right now. The helpful cycle we could like think of similar to like food and fuel, right? So wood feeds fire like logs make fire burn. Fire creates earth as ash becomes soil. Earth creates metal as ore comes from the ground. Metal creates water as metal creates condensation to create moisture. And water feeds wood because all plants need water. So that is the system. 2026 is a wood snake year. And the thing about that is the Seahawks were born in a fire dragon year. So naturally, wood fuels fire. There is that natural correlation going on right there. The Seahawks were born in a fire dragon year. Once again, year 2026 of the wood snake. So that wood fuels the fire dragon. It's the first step in the helpful system of the elements. So we definitely see once again how they have the one up, whereas the Patriots, if we look at 1959, that is going to be a earth pig year, right? If we look at theirs, earth creates metal. So what's interesting about theirs is they had their first season in 1960, which would be a metal year. So that founding definitely assisted towards that. And then in 1971, when they changed their names formally to the New England Patriots, that is also a metal year. So the founding energy fed that and helped that grow. But in terms of what's going on in 2026, not very helpful. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting point to kind of bring out. So when we look at the harmful evolution, we have a different story being told. So we have, I'm gonna read this because I can only remember so much. So we have fire overcomes metal as fire melts metal. We have metal overcoming wood as metal penetrates wood, chopping, sawing, drilling, nailing, screwing, etc. We have wood overcoming earth as tree roots break up soil and rock. We have earth overcoming water as earth absorbs the water, and water overcoming fire as water quenches fire. So with that, we could see in the same circumstance how a earth metal year is not going to be as beneficial with wood energy, because we have those two negatives with metal penetrating wood, metal overcoming it, but that not being helpful, that's harmful. And then with earth absorbing water, pigs are naturally associated with the water energy as well. So with the fire that's used for the Seahawks, then we kind of have this like weird energy where elementally the Patriots still don't have that leg up. So another interesting thing that I realized as we were approaching the AFC and NFC championships is just the type of energy we have. Obviously right now in America, we are in a very split reality, where we have people who believe one extreme thing and others who are maybe fighting for human rights, where they are not coexisting well. And in this game, I also knew that there was going to be some energy like that, let alone with the transits we have coming up. It just makes sense. This game is really showing the American symbolism going on between the lines, and yeah, I want to break that down to you. So here's where it really gets interesting over here on this side of the world in Mandalandia in my crazy brain. Because this isn't just about football, this is essentially about which America is going to win in this crazy world we're living in right now. So we have the Patriots. The Patriots are named after the Revolutionary War Minutemen. Patriots are basically, in layman's terms, people who are willing to sacrifice themselves for nationalism, for their country, for what they believe their inherent rights are. And we see that here now more than ever, so presently, where people feel very entitled to, you know, this country. This is their country, even with the different energies that might not point to that, you know. So we also have the most famous Patriots player being Tom Brady. Tom Brady definitely shows the dynasty. You think of dynasties in the NFL, you think of Tom Brady. So when we associate Patriot energy with dynasties, it once again adds to that vision of, hey, this is what America should look like. This is what it should be built up on. We think about their colors. Their colors are red, white, and blue. How does it get more American than that? So we also have them winning multiple Super Bowls back to back sometimes, and it's just that very much established dominance, that USA homegrown dominance essentially is what we have grown accustomed to a point that for a lot of us, we kind of got upset when the Patriots would win. It's like, okay, like, let someone else. But even when we just think about it, New England really is the original America. You know, that's part of where colonizers first came and first settled, and those are part of the like first 13. I think I need to go to a history class. Please forgive me. They established New America on the East Coast, and Boston being a major part of that. New England being a major part of that. It's part of that original America. This is that Make America Great energy, where we ignored the indigenous people who were already there, and we definitely established our dominance and said, hey, we're here and this is ours now. So when we think about Patriots, it's essentially representing who gets to be American, what type of Americans are okay, and those are the ones who put the nation above all else, you know, what they believe is their inherent right. And the entire mythos of that wrapped up into that we can see in the establishment of the Patriots. And this isn't about the team, this is about the symbology behind the teams, because I don't find it coincidental that we are living in the times we're living in and we have this Patriot appearance in the biggest game of I'm gonna say the world. I don't know if that's accurate, but at least the nation. So with Seattle, I think the Seahawks imagery and spiritual meaning is definitely interesting as well. The Seahawk is another name for an osprey. Interesting thing about an osprey is they are hunters of the land, the sea, and the air. They're able to weave in between multiple elements, which is definitely really rare. And when you really have that like master fisherman and being able to, you know, be a creature of the air, also exist on land and the scene, that just really creates a strong energy in that, almost a hybrid energy, which we could also use as a terminology for the people of America who have been here for generations upon generations, who have been mixed with different cultures and people of different origins, and created this melting pot of what makes America beautiful, what makes America different, what makes America unique, where we have a lovely term that I recently learned, the children of tomorrow, which is essentially like mixed kids who are so many different things that it's almost a disservice to just put them in one category. So when we have New England being one of the first places colonizers came, we have the furthest point, literally like one of the furthest points being Seattle, way Pacific Northwest, definitely a very indigenous place where we have presence of a lot of communities that we don't necessarily find other places, such as Asian Pacific connections, and just very indigenous. And when we think about that in terms of when colonizers initially came over, you know, it's easier to get there than it was way over there. That doesn't mean they eventually, that they didn't eventually make way, but it definitely is a place that is more associated with indigenous cultures of America. Some other interesting aspects about the Seahawks in general is just their 12th man energy, which I think is a very interesting thing. So they have very loud, very very loud, connected, family-like fans who show up and essentially create this 12th man just because the energy they bring, the energy they pour out, it essentially makes every field they play on the home field for them. It gives them a different advantage. Anything that could be manufactured, because it's essentially like the heart of this community. And it's one of those things that's not something that's easily built and just comes to fruition, but something that is cultivated over time, whether that's the matter of a season or the matter of, you know, decades. And I think that's really interesting. Another interesting aspect is that Jody Allen is the current owner of the Seahawks. She's been sitting on having to sell the Seahawks for the last 6+ years, as it was in her brother's will, who was the initial owner of the Seahawks. And when we look at the Seahawks and Jody Allen, it's showing the last of a dying breed, the last of like a family-owned franchise, something that we don't see anymore in sports the same way that we previously did. Now it's all corporations, it's billionaires, it's people who essentially want to pimp and extort the game because they see it as the cash cow that it is, essentially. Sounds crazy, but when we look at the reasons why she's been avoiding this, obviously it's one of those things that it's family. It goes back to that like 12th man energy where it's just like, to a lot, it's going to be inevitable. She's going to have to sell regardless, but it's one of those things where the meaning of it is so much more than just a simple business transaction. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with understanding and seeing through the facade in this day and age. Is like, it's easy to be cold and calculated, but what about having heart? What about having compassion? What about kindness, you know? And just thinking about what that means. Imagine having to give away something that you saw your family nurture, love, pour their livelihood into, and then knowing that you're eventually going to have to sell that to someone who's not going to care as much. You know, it's definitely a difficult situation, but very interesting to think about. We have the dragon symbolism as well. When we just look at their Chinese zodiac and part of that energy, we have the tiger. Like I said, the tiger has insane endurance. They should have won. The water slowed them down. Luckily, the water isn't impacting us in this moment. So at least there's that. But Between the dragon and the tiger, those are two of the strongest animals in the Chinese great race story. So it's definitely really interesting. And then we also have the aspect with the dragon and their evolution. We could see the other America essentially, just because this is about something that's like transpired longer than time itself. It's something that's really been cultivated. You know, it takes a dragon thousands of years to become a dragon from a snake. It's not something that just happens over time, in the same way that we are interconnected with this place we call home here in America. It's not just, so yeah, it's definitely crazy, especially when we think about the fact that this could be the last Super Bowl where we have family representation shown, and it's basically the end of the line before the corporate takeover. And this Super Bowl is essentially the last stand as a family owned business before corporate takeover is inevitable, essentially. And I think that in that context of that heart is definitely super interesting, and just understanding what that means on so many different levels, especially in the world where we live in, where corporations make billions and we have small mom and pop businesses who could barely keep their doors open. It's also super interesting when we start to look at the astrology that's going to be happening over the next coming months. So let's get into that. Okay, so now that we've got Chinese astrology on lock, let's look into Western astrology and really just like add some layers to this, add some complexity to this, because although it might be a lot right now, we're going to see at the end of this video how essentially everything's pointing to the same reality. So yeah, let's get into it. In the next coming months, we're going to have Uranus move into Gemini. This is a transit that happens about every 84 years. That's how long it takes Uranus to make a full complete cycle, is 84 years. On average, Uranus spends 7-ish years in each sign. So for the last 7 years, we've been in Taurus, and right now we're still in Taurus, although retrograde. But we are moving towards Uranus in Gemini. And what does that mean? What are some of the things that come to mind with that? Well, let me tell you. This is a lot. This is where astrology isn't so fun. Every time that Uranus has been in Gemini over the course of the history of the United States, there has been an American war of some sorts. So initially we have 1775 to 1781, Uranus in Gemini, Revolutionary War. Hello, America. This is where we were born. This officially started, I believe, 11 days after Uranus entered Gemini. So it was one of those things like Uranus and Gemini, guess what? We're here, we're showing up, which is crazy. So next war we had was the Civil War. The entire war fell within Uranus and Gemini from 1859 to 1865. So once again, yay, love that for us. Next up, we had 1942 to 1948. Uranus and Gemini brought us World War II. Battle of Midway happens right after entry. Don't we love that? Don't we love that? Don't we love that? And this year, we're going to have Uranus and Gemini. And what's that to bring? We don't know. I feel like we're gearing up to a civil war. We're gearing up to a civil war, at least between the government and the people. But I digress. Whether you believe that or not, that's just my opinion. So yeah. Either way, the pattern is clear. Let's break down what Uranus and Gemini really means. Gemini rules communication of sorts, so it's definitely going to be information, communication, thoughts, the way we think about stuff, the mindset we take towards things. Uranus is the planet of sporadic and crazy change that nobody sees coming. It's just, hey, one day I'm here, tomorrow I'm doing this. Boom, what's happening? Yeah, very, very interesting in that aspect. So when we look at what's going on, the pattern's kind of clear. We have communication revolutions, we have information warfare, we have divided narratives, and that all equals conflict. No matter which way you think about it. Gemini is also twins, it's duality, it's two versions of reality, it's one versus the other. We have Uranus's disruption, as rebellion, as breaking old systems and making way for what's new coming forward. So those are two of the themes that Uranus and Gemini brings, and we see how that correlates with wars of the past, where essentially all of it boils back to two different narratives and understanding like, hey, this is where we're at now, and this is essentially how do we go forward from here. So Uranus first entered Gemini a few months ago, but right now it's back in Taurus, making its last wraparound for this lifetime. We're never going to experience Uranus in Taurus ever again because it takes 84 years. And frankly, well, I guess if you're a baby, you're probably not watching this right now. Maybe you could experience that, but yeah, I'm 28. I don't think I'm going to be alive, unfortunately, and fortunately, all at the same time. We also have the spiritual warfare that's previously been used, like falling away, that's no longer harming us. Now we're really here to show up as spiritual. We're really here to let go of that spiritual warfare that has held us down, and we're really here to show up as the spiritual warriors that we're meant to be and really fight for what's right, to stop the spiritual bypassing and really start showing up instead. And I think that's beautiful energy because it's one of those things where nothing changes unless something changes, and ultimately you have to be the change you want to see in the world. So right now is definitely a crazy time. It's actions on visions instead of just dreaming. And I think especially being in Pisces for the last bit, I need to look at how long that transit is because off rip I want to say it's 14 years, but I could be mistaken. Without getting into Pluto and Aquarius, we also recently had Pluto and Aquarius of the last year. It's been in there. We're still in the very early signs. None of us is going to live to see Pluto return. I want to say it's 20 something years in each sign, so this is a very new energy. But Pluto is about transforming. Aquarius is the community, the collective, and I feel it coming. It's also one of those things where natally in the US's chart, that is also its home sign is Pluto and Aquarius, which makes sense of why this country started off on such a beautiful vision of being somewhere new for people of all ethnicities, all races to come to dream a new dream and have access to the American dream. And I love that. It's kind of been perverted in a way and changed and modified in ways that I believe was never initially planned, but now that we're coming back into that energy, I think it's absolutely insane. I'm not going to go into much depth about that, but there's also that energy where we're very early on in that process, and nothing is coincidental. There's layers to this, and hopefully with these few layers you're able to understand why this is so impactful. Just to kind of like do a brief recap about the Western astrology, we have Neptune moving into Aries, really calling us to be the spiritual warriors that we're meant to stop spiritually bypassing, to show up, to do the actions. We have Uranus approaching Gemini, which is all about a communication revolution, something happening in our collective way of thinking where it's like, hey, maybe we no longer stand for this the same way that we previously did. Who knows? And then we have the wood snake energy, which is very interesting when we just think about the wood snake transforming through wisdom, growing stronger, evolving into that dragon. With all that energy being here and now, I think it's interesting to see the different correlations between the different aspects and see how they all essentially are pointing to the same theme, same messages, where we're really early on in this journey, but nothing is coincidence. Everything is happening now for a reason, and in the future we'll be able to look back and say, like, I lived through that, you know. Hopefully. I'm not trying to scare nobody, but all three are definitely about change and action and breaking old patterns, and I believe that's beautiful. So some other interesting things about it being a 1 year specifically, and even a 9 year, if we think about 2016, that was Peyton Manning's last game played. He retired a couple months after that. That was the end of an era in a way, and now we are in a 1 year, essentially starting a new era with the snake energy in a place of transformation, in a place where lots of energy really reigns heavy and true. And I think that's really interesting to think about as well. And some of the correlations of the number one is the sun energy. And when I think about the sun, I think about the life force, what moves you, why you do what you do, what lights you up. And to think about all of these themes and what it means for either team to win tomorrow is definitely very interesting. I think it's new beginnings regardless. I think the narratives that are going to be pushed upon us, and whether we accept those or not, I think it's also interesting. It's the day before the Super Bowl right now, but we even have TP. I can't even think about it. Turning Point USA, I think is the name of it. Their show essentially got canceled. Kid Rock has been being exposed for a bunch of stuff. We have Bad Bunny set to perform tomorrow, American Citizen, who everyone is freaking out over. Not everybody, but you know, some people are freaking out over him performing. And to even see how that plan, where they wanted to have their own American, because Bad Bunny is still American, Super Bowl halftime performance, and how that's not going to happen anymore. Very interesting. I look too mischievous about that, but truly, the universe is funny and jokes could write themselves. Everything is essentially screaming, it's a new cycle, transformation is here, and the revolution is also here. And I don't say that to be scary. You know, revolutions are similar enough to resolutions, where we could be the change we wish to see. And even if you are a better person today than you were yesterday, guess what? You did something important, and you don't know who that's going to impact. So yeah, this is not to scare anybody. This is like motivation. This is fuel. This is understanding what's going on in the matrix that we're not necessarily seeing, that they don't want us to see. But when we learn how to read between the lines, that's when it gets fun. That's when it gets interesting. That's when it's like, hey, I wonder what storylines are going to be told and how people are going to react to it. Nothing is coincidental, and the more you realize that, the more fun this existence becomes. I feel like Earth is a school where we come here to learn lessons and get understanding on things that maybe we previously haven't had in other lifetimes. And yeah, that's my personal thoughts and beliefs. And not everyone believes in reincarnation the same way I do, but I think it's one of those things that, like, you can't lie. It is kind of beautiful to think about it that way. But yeah, let's get into what it means, maybe symbolically, depending on which team wins and what that narrative being spun is really about. So if the Patriots won, some of the themes that we could say is the old system wins one last time, and with that, tradition and establishment beat transformation one last time. Do I think it's likely to happen? No, but I feel like sometimes we live in a world where the narratives we're given are the ones that they want us to receive, not the ones that are actually there. And the thing about that is we might delay this revolution a little bit, but ultimately it's going to make it worse in the end. It's going to be more violent, because the further you are oppressed, the more rage essentially builds up. And that's where I think it's really interesting to look at that in that aspect, because it's simple to say, yeah, America, hold on one last time, but do I think that's going to be the story told in a decade from now? I don't think so. I think they might try, but we clearly see now people fighting back, and that's beautiful and scary and chaotic and all of the things. We would also see the material plane beating the spiritual plane, which, like I said, it's not unlikely that it could happen, but it would be very interesting, because, like, as above, so below, everything's interconnected. You know, we are the cosmos. We are made of stardust. Stardust is made of us. And I think it would be interesting. Not likely, but interesting. Some of the other stuff the Patriots win would tell us about what's going on in the world is just that corporate perfection is here, and you know, that is ready to erase our roots, ready to erase our family-owned businesses, our local stuff. And we see that now, where I could tell you where 5 McDonald's are and maybe 2 local burger places. But that's because that dominance has been established, and it's our jobs now to kind of fight back against the systems who are doing nothing but harming us and making money off of us, but not pouring back into our communities. We also see this pure origin story definitely taking a major +1, just because they represent the pioneers, essentially, you know, the ones who are, hey, you know, I'm first gen here, which is funny if we just even think about that sentence. Yeah. It's definitely just resisting the snakes, urge to shed skin and to grow and transform, so that way it could evolve into more beautiful things. But either way, it will be interesting to see what happens. It's essentially the individual Patriots versus the collective consciousness, the 12th man that we saw with the Seahawks energy. Some of the things that we'll see if the Seahawks win is transformation beating the traditional way. And that's definitely something that I think we're going to see more of in coming years, but also the family-owned businesses beating the corporations that aren't bringing so much to us. You know, they're nothing but corporate machines, and although it might be one last time, it's still significant and it's still meaningful, I think, just to think what that would mean to Jody Ellen and her brother's legacy. You know, might not have happened the way he hoped it would, but it was to bring glory to him, and you know, I'm not mad at it. I understand why it would be hard to separate ways. Some of the other things we would see is the dragon and the snake connection really making manifest and becoming true, and showing how all of those layers of Eastern astrology really come together, really layer together to create something bigger than what we have been taught to believe in. I think we also have, with the one energy, just really showing how the new beginnings are beating the old traditions, the old ways. Heed with what is going to come next, and that those old traditions don't need to be brought on with us, because the future is now. It's definitely the pause before Uranus gets into Gemini. And I think overall it favors the aligned team, you know, the ones who are aligned with all of the spiritual meaning that is going on in the stars. And to me, that is clearly the Seahawks. What happens tomorrow, we will see. But yeah, Seahawks also, like I mentioned, also could represent the indigenous people, the Osprey bridging water, land, sea, that collective power with the 12th man energy overcoming this individual glory, you know, that single self-sacrificing individual mindset, family ownership, really taking stand, community ownership with that 12th man energy, just really, even if it's one last time, you know, making that appearance that it's going to be known before it's sold eventually. And I think ultimately with the dragon energy, it really just paying homage to it having originated as a snake and the evolution that is being asked for. All of the themes just correlate so well. And yeah, I think regardless, the spiritual truth is just that this is going to be a new reality. The Seahawks aren't just playing in that energy, they're creating that energy. And I think it will be very telling just to see what happens now, because the Seahawks represent so much more than just a football team from the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. You know, they are really embracing that energy, and you know, all this stuff is very much aligned for the twins. So we'll see which narrative we are given tomorrow. Yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed being in my brain for a little bit and just seeing all the crazy madness that I see when I look at these crazy entertainment things. I could have definitely went into Bad Bunny and all of the implications of that. I might want to do a deep dive on him and see how these transits impacted him and what that really had to say, especially after his Grammys moment where he spent that alone in fear because of the threat that's been placed on his life. So, you know, if you're interested in that, definitely let me know. Other than that, I hope you guys see how this is more than material. This is spiritual, and just all the implications that really means. Whether you want to believe it or not, astrology is still an astrology. And ultimately, I just like to give people insight to all the different systems that I use, that I love, that I use to decode the world around me and really see how it shapes a reality. But yeah, if you have any ideas or topics, things you want to see me cover, just definitely let me know. Leave a comment below if you think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, if you think it's somewhere in the middle. Let me know. I love to converse and I want to hear others' opinions. You know, no fun being in a sound box. But yeah,